Greetings, friends, and welcome to another episode of The Mistake Zone, your weekly dose of our lives and the mistakes within them. My name is Jaren Wade. Joining me, as always, one of my best friends in the whole wide world, Matt Alba. Hey, Matt.
Yo.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
Matt, that's great. We're also joined by another one of our best friends in the whole wide world, Julian. Hey, Julian.
Hey,
How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Man, you guys, it's great to hear that you two are doing good because I don't know, maybe podcasting with Rakush last week wasn't the best idea for me because I am getting over a cold. So I
No.
apologize
Oh,
in advance to everyone listening to me right now. A bit under the weather, but doing a lot better than I was doing on Friday. But guys,
Mm-hmm.
I know last week when we were all together, you mentioned that you've been playing some Avowed, and I think that will be our big topic for this week. But
Mm-hmm.
before we kind of get into it, there was some news that pertained to my interests this week, and I would like to get some of your reactions to what kind of went, around the fandoms that we follow that we're adjacent to. And I think one of the bigger ones to catch, at least me and you by surprise, Matt, was
Mm-hmm.
that this week, author of our beloved My Dress Up Darling series, Shinchi Fukuda, announced on social media that, chapter 114 of My Dress Up Darling was published in the latest issue of Young Gongon, but the next chapter will be the last one. And then, of course, he thanked all the readers for support. So next
Mm-hmm.
month, March 2025, chapter 115 will apparently be the final chapter of My Dress Up Darling. And as a series that has been discussed a lot here on the Mistake Zone, um, yeah, really, really surprising. Matt, you were the one
Yeah.
that kind of broke this to me. What was your initial reaction to the news that My Dress Up Darling will apparently come to an end next month?
I was very surprised because going into, I guess, like 114, I didn't know that the announcement had gone off saying that
Mm-hmm.
115 is going to be the final chapter. So the whole time that I was reading 114, I was like, why does this chapter feel like it's a wrap up chapter for
Yeah.
the whole series? Like they're putting a lot of like really like big flags up, hey, that hey, maybe the series is gonna end soon. And then, I got to the end of that chapter, saw some comments about it, and they're like, oh yeah, this is ending next chapter. And I was like, that's very, very abrupt considering
Yep.
everything that's been happening in the past, like I want to say like 5 chapters.
Yeah.
Wait, Julian, do you read this?
no, I haven't. I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
I read like a while ago, but then I stopped like reading the updates and stuff. But that is sudden because when I know you mentioned it to me, Jaren, but when you said that it was ending soon, I thought it was like okay, like a couple of chapters. I wasn't aware it was legitimately just the next chapter was the last one.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So like, is this a
We
cancellation or like,
uh
I guess do they know?
I don't know what you've seen, Matt, but from my little digging that I've done, nothing, just a lot of speculation just from the fandom, but nothing really
Mm-hmm.
concrete, I believe, has come out regarding just this announcement, why it's ending next month.
Uh-huh.
But I feel like, I don't know, it really depends on what happens on the next chapter. And I know we'll probably talk about this. I believe it's supposed to be scheduled for March 15th, but that's kind of the
Mm-hmm.
general date that's been floating around. But I think my initial reaction to the announcement was for a series that I've come to adore over the last, over 100 chapters. I feel depending on how a bow is placed on it, it will either it will go from what I would perceive as a goat tier romance manga or romance series to kind of in that weird area of what could have been, because Matt, we're no
Hmm.
stranger to, backseat mangaka speculation when we talk about My Dress Up Darling here on the Mistake Zone, where
Hmm.
there was so much potential, especially with the current storyline regarding just Marin and then her potentially being scouted by a professional cosplay agency or the author of the Hanyul manga.
Hmm.
And I feel like all these threads were kind of abruptly tied up. And now that we're heading into the final chapter,
Uh-huh.
I just kind of wish that it explored way more, I don't know, just not necessarily heavier topics, but I thought there was room for them just to kind of dive in deeper than just really surface level cosplay between a group of teenagers. And maybe that's on me for wanting more from this, high
Hmm.
school slice
Yeah.
of life.
Shouldn't have had expectations, man. Okay.
Man.
Yeah, I think that was
Oh
on
man.
me. But Matt,
Uh-huh.
just with the suddenness of this, how are you feeling without reading the final chapter, but just how are you feeling overall about the series and kind of the last few chapters as well?
The last few chapters have all been, I thought very good. I thought they were leading to, like you said, like a Marin getting scouted arc, or like, Gojo working through stuff. And I thought, yeah, Mike Joseph Darling, sure, they like got together, but this is, probably has two or three more arcs at least
Yep.
to go through.
Mm.
And it just it reading 114 without knowing beforehand that it was ending was such a weird feeling in my heart of like, this feels like a cancellation almost to me. Like that's how abrupt this transition from it going into story to it like winding down felt to me. Where I feel, I honestly, I'm very glad that Julian in particular is on this episode, because Julian, I don't remember if you remember this manga, but I haven't felt this way since MXO.
Man, I still mourn MXO every now and then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like I I remember when I was reading MXO, which was, basically just like a school kind of like, I want to say like super, not superpower, just like magic school manga basically, shonen. And you know, at the time, the way that they kind of like ended it is, hey, we're going to make this guy like make a choice to like go to another school to like learn magic and like be better at it. In essence, like that's what happened at the end of it. And when they gave him that choice, I thought it was like, your classic kind of like just like a dilemma that the hero has to go through on, hey, do I go like learn magic somewhere else? And I thought like, oh yeah, they're just setting up like a fake dilemma for this guy to go through. And when he actually picked the other school, I was shocked. And then she just ended, and I was like, what? I think, yeah, that was, yeah, my first like cancellation of a series, and I haven't felt this badly since then.
Yeah, this kind of does like it is very reminiscent of that because this. I mean, granted, I haven't read the latest chapters. Like,
Mm-hmm,
I'll
mm-hmm,
be honest. I've only kind of just been tangential to where it currently is, but from what I'm gathering, it kind of feels like the start, like where it is right now. It kind of feels like the start of an arc. Um,
mm-hmm.
but it's suddenly ending. So like, I don't know. That's yeah. Like, I totally agree with what you're kind of saying there.
Yeah, when I think about the common criticisms about My Dress Up Darling throughout its entire run so far, it is how this series seems like it's at odds with itself. Where on one hand, you do have your slice of life romance, story between Marin and Gojo, but you also have the cosplay element where we're no stranger to seeing the reception of some of the slower chapters, some of the slower arcs where they were so heavy on the cosplay, just nuances, the procedure, and what goes into it. Where, again, for them to just end with them getting together and not explore, okay, the potential of professional cosplay or maybe that dynamic of even Gojo being scouted of, hey, maybe some companies, some agencies want him to create costumes
Mhm.
for them, maybe some sort of an apprenticeship opportunity, where I feel like that's such a missed opportunity to further go into those areas of cosplay while seeing how their relationship navigates around that. But just to see them get together and then all of a sudden, hey, let's go on a few dates, and then all of a sudden it's over. I feel like that just leaves a lot to be desired. And again, that could be my problem of maybe I just want to see more from this series because I love these characters so much, but who knows?
Yeah,
Maybe this is a citrus situation where even though the initial run ends, maybe 2 weeks later there's a plus spin-off where
Oh
it
my
just kind of
god.
picks up where they left off and they go on new adventures. But maybe that's just me. Sorry, Julian, I cut you off there.
no, it's just because I like, jumping off what you're kind of saying there. It's kind of falling into that, like well known, I guess at this point, like romance trappings in a lot of anime and
Mm-hmm.
manga where it kind of ends when the characters have kind of gotten together, where it's kind of like the goal is like them getting together, but like in real life, the goal when it comes to relationships is kind of that staying together.
Yeah.
Like how do you navigate that life now with this other person, especially if you have kind of separate goals and separate like, with both of these characters kind of having, they have a shared interest, but also kind of like a separate, like it's like a shared but also separate interest with,
Yeah.
and kind of like how they navigate that. Like there's a lot of things you could have done with that. And then it's just like this, it kind of just falls back into that with most romance animes and mangas where it's like, okay, now that they're together, like that's it. We're gonna end it there. And it sucks too, because like, and maybe again, this is like an totally uneducated perspective because like, I've only really caught up with it with tangentially, but I can kind of foresee if this was planned. And maybe this is a bias because I really like the Culture Week act or the act with the Culture Week, I guess, if that's the arc.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I can kind of foresee if this had been planned, like if that arc could have been written as an ending, I feel like, because like it kind of also
Hmm.
tied up a lot of like, oh, like Gojo now is like integrating into, and getting friends and like kind of getting this, like it could have been written as an ending, but now that they've continued or decided to continue it, now it kind of just feels sudden. I'm not sure if that made sense, but like in my head, like there's like a version where that it technically could have ended there if you were just gonna end it,
Yeah.
so
Hmm.
abruptly.
Yeah, because to kind of jump off that real quick, I feel like that would be a perfect way to wrap up the series, just because, and if Marin were to confess, or vice versa after that.
Hmm.
But, we went through the coffin arc, which, Matt, I'm surprised. A lot of people like the coffin arc, but maybe not. Maybe I'm just a weirdo here. But
Hmm.
going to the latest major arc, the annual one, where you have so many pieces set up to, from, again, as I said before, professional cosplayers, that mangaka, um, Gojo potentially putting himself out there and revealing that he's the one who created the costume, where you have so many
Hmm.
potential platforms to jump off into more storylines where to see them, in retrospect, just be brushed all under the table and then them go on cute dates before the ending leaves a lot to be desired. And I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm really curious to see what 115 will just be, how the plan to kind of finish it all off. But at the
Hmm.
same time, it's what could have been, man. It's what could
Oh
have
man.
been. But Matt,
Oh.
what's the last word before we actually read it next month?
I don't know. If the final chapter doesn't somehow make like Mervin cosplay as like a Hina doll, I'm gonna rage quit this manga even harder.
And there
I
has
don't
to be
know.
it, right? That's kind of what it all
Yeah.
led up to, right? Like in terms
Yeah.
of,
Hmm.
okay, yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. I don't know. You know what? No. You know what? I'm gonna I'm gonna believe in like my dress up darling Shippuden or something
Right, right,
like.
right. Because I know we said it last time we really talked about the series, Matt, where
Uh
I
huh.
think Gojo himself is such a interesting character that I feel like we haven't explored, especially the but when you consider him and his love for Hina dolls as well. And
Hmm.
we're talking about tropes, but they haven't really ventured into the trope of what's our career path going to be, where are we going to go to university, will we even go to university. And I feel like there are so many just avenues to explore, even if we don't go into the cosplay side of things, where yeah, I'm really curious to know why it's ending so soon, and I'm hoping for that spin-off. But
Hmm.
I guess we'll have one more discussion next month where I'll try not to. I'll make sure to listen to this episode before we talk about the last chapter, just so I don't repeat myself too much in a few weeks. But
Hmm.
speaking about potential new installments, guys, it's been a weird week if you are a Tony Hawk fan, because I'm not sure if you guys have been paying attention to the rumor mill, but it was quite the roller coaster. I was trying to think of a elaborate skateboarding pun there, but I'll stick with the tried and true roller coaster. It kind of started earlier last week while on the Breakfast Club. Professional skater Tyshawn Jones mentioned that, and I quote, I'm in a Tony Hawk coming out, so that's cool. They got a new one they're remastering, so that's about to come out. I was in the last one, which he was referring to Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2. And,
Hmm.
this is kind of on the heels of last fall, Matt, when we mentioned how we were coming up to such a pivotal anniversary for the Tony Hawk franchise. And Mr. Hawk himself said to stay tuned because there's something on in the works. And kind of around this time, Tyshawn Jones was on the Breakfast Club. There was a user on Reset Era claiming that he knew someone who had pitched an ad for the upcoming Tony Hawk game. And this kind of led to a few days later where the latest Call of Duty season update brought a new map called The Grind, which contained a
Hmm.
banner that said 03, 04, 25, and it was kind of stylized in the classic THPS logo. And then finally, a few days ago, the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater website was updated with a countdown timer on that will end on March 4th at 10 a.m. Eastern. The countdown also features the Iron Galaxy logo, which suggests that they're the ones handling the project. I believe Iron Galaxy worked on the Steam port for the previous entry as well. Plus, if you do the tried and true, check the source code for the countdown page. It contains a THPS 3-4 countdown label,
Ooh.
either referring to the date, once again, 3-4, or the fact that this will most likely be the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 remaster. Again, such a roller coaster, Julian, as someone who also has experience with the Tony Hawk franchise. Uh, are you excited about potentially replaying a remastered 3 and 4?
I think you're overestimating my familiarity with the VR sports game.
Really? Am I the only Tony Hawk boy here?
I played one to death, and I absolutely
Okay.
love one. Two also, but I cannot in my mind like picture three and four.
Okay.
Which is the one with the helicopter hangar? Is that two?
Yep, that's
That's
2.
two. Okay. Yeah, like it's weird because like I feel like I should be familiar with three and four. Which one's the one with Spider-Man as a secret character?
That's 2.
Okay, then two. Two is where two is where most of my knowledge ends. Um,
Okay. Fair enough.
yeah, I mean,
Where
it'd be nice to check it out. Like, when you think of Tony Hawk for you, because you're kind of like the super fan here. Like, is it in three or four or?
For me personally, when I think Tony Hawk, I either think of Tony Hawk 3 or I think of Tony Hawk's Underground 1, just because
Yes, okay.
I feel like,
Thug one is a big one.
yeah,
Hmm.
I feel like those in particular are such turning points for this series. It's kind of crazy that this franchise has a lot of turning points, but I would argue that it is Tony Hawk's
Like Ride.
Well, not for the worst, but for Tony Hawk's 3, that's when you were introduced to the revert, and then you were also introduced to online play. And then Thug 1, that's when you have the story mode. I know Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4 is the one when they kind of introduced the new kind of layout of how you progress in the game, more open world, more skating around these bigger levels to accept missions rather than, your 2-minute countdown. But for the most part, from what I do see from the community as well, it is 3 and it is Thug that really have you know, the higher memories from the community itself. Where I'm personally really excited for this just because I love 3 and 4. I have to admit, is one of the mainline titles that I'm least familiar with.
Mhm.
But Matt,
Mhm.
does this do anything for you as well?
Honestly, I don't think so. I think I live with
Okay.
Julian in the Tony Hawk 1 and 2 led.
Alrighty.
What's the big like
Well,
level for Tony Hawk 3? If you had to like pick a big like level like people would be familiar with.
uh, it it's kind of hard to mention just because I think it would be LA because with the LA level that was where if you grinded 3 certain rails an earthquake will happen and that kind of changes the level layout a
Mm.
bit. So that was kind
Oh
of the
man.
first instance of notable level um just changing by doing something, and that was taken to up a notch in Tony Hawk's Underground 2 with the World Destruction Tour. So I'm personally really curious just
Oh.
to see where this goes. Again, this is where I'm curious to see Iron Galaxy being the ones attached to it, just because, as we all know, Vicarious Visions, they worked on the original 1 and 2 remaster, but then they became, I believe it's Blizzard Albany, and they're just working on Diablo now. So I'm curious to see if they're just picking up what the foundation that Vicarious Visions really laid out with 1 and 2, and Iron Galaxy is just taking over in that regard. But I'm really curious to see what form this takes place. And it's also the fact that Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4, they had some notable unlockable characters and a lot of unlockable characters in general, where with the remaster of 1 and 2, we didn't have Spider-Man. So I'm curious to see if we also won't get Darth
Ooh.
Maul, we won't get Wolverine, we won't get
Mhm.
um, one of the bounty hunters from Star Wars. I apologize
Mhm.
just because
I think it was Django.
it was, yeah, it was
Right?
Django. It
Yeah.
was Django. So I'm curious to see if not only the licensed characters don't return, but I'm also curious to see if some of the fun unlockable characters like Demoness or Pro Surfer Kelly Slater will return as well. But I guess we'll see on March 4th when this is essentially announced. And uh, rumors also speculating that
Oh.
or circulating that this might be a surprise drop in the summer. So I guess if they're gonna formally announce it on the 4th, then I don't think this will be a surprise drop. But
Was Doom Guy in the like 1 and 2 remakes?
Doom Guy was a unlockable character in the PC version of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3.
Okay, but he didn't come back in like the remakes, right? Or like the 1 and
Um
2 remaster or whichever
Yeah,
word
were
they're
there
using
secret
for it.
characters in the remix?
so in okay, this is gonna be weird. So Doom Guy would, I think he would, in theory, should come back for this remaster of Tony Hawk's 3 if they wanted to be all encompassing, because I don't believe he's appeared in any other
Okay.
game.
Because I think it would be cool if they brought back Doom Guy, but they brought him back as Dark Ages Doom Guy.
Yeah, I was gonna
Just
say
for,
then
you
you
know,
would. Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
that Microsoft synergy. But yeah.
Hmm.
So when we think about Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1, they only had one unlockable character in Officer Dick, who returned in the remaster. But they used Jack Black's likeness for that. Private Carrera was, I believe, either in the N64 version that you can get via code, but you couldn't get her. In Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, you had Spider Man, but you also had Trixie, I believe, No, sorry, Private Carrera was in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, but Trixie was the Dreamcast unlockable character replacing Private Carrera. But neither of them appeared in the remake. You did get the Roswell alien, which was a background NPC in the original Roswell level of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1. And then if you had the deluxe version, you got the skeleton from like the PAL skating brand. So no Spider-Man, which
Mm.
really puts doubt in, oh, if there will be licensed
Yeah.
characters in this remake, but I do like the idea of bringing Dark Ages Doom guy just because, again, if Activision is under Microsoft now and they're promoting, they're teasing Tony Hawk in an Activision game,
Mm-hmm.
I think there's more likely synergy there as opposed to relicensing Marvel characters or Star Wars characters. But
Bring
again,
in Call of Duty Shooty Man.
I mean, there was a Call of Duty character in Tony Hawk's Underground too, so that's also a possibility given again, they're teasing this in a new Call of Duty map
Speaking of which,
where
like, what is the feasibility of Thug 1 and 2? Because wasn't there I mean I could be wrong here, I could just be misremembering. Wasn't there like a licensing thing with Bam Margera with the remakes or something?
so that's also the question that I'm really curious about because, one of the biggest things about Tony Hawk's the remake of 1 and 2 is they brought back all the previous skaters from those games plus, a new batch of skaters. Tony Hawk the new generation
Mm-hmm.
where uh let's just say Bam Margera in current popular culture has seen better days
Hmm.
and he wasn't in the latest Jackass movie either just because unfortunately he's been going through some stuff that he is working through. So what since Bam debuted in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, I think that would be the telling
Oh,
point
okay, okay.
of
That could be like the
yeah,
litmus test.
Oh.
Yeah.
yeah. Because as you kind of mentioned, Julian, Tony Hawk's Underground 2 was so Jackass inspired um, that Bam and the rest of the Jackass gang played such a central part in that game where I'm really curious to see if Bam makes it into
Mm.
this remake. So I think that's one of the biggest questions, just to see if even remastering Thug 2 would be a possibility. So I guess we'll see on March 4th. And I want to thank you guys for giving me the Tony Hawk Corner once again. But, boys, a big
Mm.
boy game came out a few weeks ago that I apologize for kind of stepping on your toes last week because I'll admit I was the poor. I didn't get early access into the new Obsidian RPG Avowed,
Mm-hmm.
but we all have some playtime under our belts. I'm just about to complete the first area. Matt, you mentioned that you're kind of halfway through the second area, and Julian, you are on the third area as well.
Hmm.
But speaking about Julian, you being the resident Obsidian fan, what were your just general expectations going into Avowed, and how are you feeling towards the game, kind of in general, after, dedicating some substantial time to it so far?
Oof, that's a loaded question. I think my feelings towards this game are very complicated. Because I think I entered this game with the wrong expectations.
Hmm.
And I maybe that's on me, but I think they didn't really telegraph this well. Because a lot of the times people, I mean, I guess so prior to releasing this game, like when they announced it, a lot of people's first impression of it was this is gonna be Obsidian's take on Skyrim.
Right.
Right? It's gonna be this
Mm-hmm.
fantasy, first person fantasy game. It's gonna be open world and it's gonna be like, like it's gonna be like a Skyrim, but with Obsidian's trappings. And this got a lot of hype because you know, Obsidian's take on Fallout, quote unquote, even though like a lot of the people who made New Vegas were like the original creators of Fallout. Um, I love Obsidian's take on Fallout gave us New Vegas, which a lot of people will say and cite as like the best of modern Fallout. So
Hmm.
there was a lot of excitement when it came to what can Obsidian do with Skyrim. So I think unfortunately that idea stuck a lot in the mainstream, and I know they tried to placate that the weeks before release because a lot of the time, I think I saw news, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I recall seeing news about them talking about the idea of like, hey, like this isn't an open world game. This is gonna be more similar to the Outer Worlds,
Right.
where it is going to be these maps where like they are open, but it's gonna be like you're exploring these maps, you're exploring like these specific areas. Um, and it's not gonna be an open world. It's gonna be like the story that we're gonna be specifically trying to tell, but there are gonna be side quests. So it did seem like they tried to kind of placate that expectation a couple weeks before release, but I mean, like I guess you could kind of either argue on whether whose fault it is, and maybe it's like a little bit of both, or maybe no one's. But like when I did kind of start this game, I kind of did have those expectations of a Fallout New Vegas, and yeah, you can argue that that's on me. But also like I had kind of that idea of like, okay, even if it's not open world, it's still gonna be like this open area where they can kind of tell like a good story, you know? I think even with my placated expectations, I still felt like unfortunately it was still a little too high.
Hmm.
Wherein I still kind of expected. So in New Vegas, there's one of the arguments a lot of people talk about when it comes to Avowed is that it's the world isn't reactive. And if you go to the Avowed subreddit, and unfortunately the Avowed subreddit is full like coping, I guess, right now because most of the posts are like this game is great and or like everyone's just a hater. Um, but I think there are valid criticisms to be made about Avowed. And I think one of them is like the world really isn't as reactive as I would like it to be. And a lot of
Hmm.
people will say like, no, like you make a choice. Like example in the beginning in the first map. I'm not sure if you got past this, Jaren, but like there's a choice you make and then you kind of see the consequences of it right away. But I feel like a lot of the reactivity is like contained within like that map or that area outside of like a slide in the ending. Um,
Hmm.
so like yeah, there is some reactivity, but it's not like still not like what I would be expecting. Um, and yeah, like not to get into the gameplay because like I feel like I've been talking a little too much right now, so I'm just gonna like pause here because I have a lot to say about the gameplay as well. But like those are kind of my first impressions. So yeah, I don't know. I
Okay.
can pass that on to you guys.
Uh, so now we have Julian's
Mhm.
take, first impressions kind of being a reflective, or reflected on his kind of familiarity with Obsidian and his fondness for New Vegas. But uh, with your kind of first couple of hours with Avowed, Matt, what were your general impressions of the game?
For the first couple hours, I was honestly like pretty satisfied as far as my expectations. Um, I did go into this game similarly to Julian, expecting something a lot more, I guess, like grand than what Avowed actually is.
hmm
But I think I was, I guess, like able to more so like, I don't know if placate is the right word here, but like placate myself in terms of like what was actually given, in terms of,
Mm-hmm.
oh, like is, I guess, like it has always, I always viewed this as being like a smaller Skyrim, just because of it coming from the Avowed property, and like, or not Avowed property, like Avowed's world coming from the Pillars of Eternity property. And I
Right.
always viewed Pillars of Eternity, even though it's like probably like not right to say it, I always viewed it as sort of like almost an indie game.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so my expected scope of this was, even though I did expect it, like, being an open world kind of like Skyrim, I was expecting something smaller anyways. So I think I was probably better off for thinking about it that way.
Right. Yeah, I feel like I approached it in a similar manner as Matt, just because have to preface it again, I love me some New Vegas. And I think what really helped me set my expectations was the fact that when I went into the Outer Worlds, I feel like people were comparing that to, oh, this is Obsidian's take on space Fallout, or this is going to be New Vegas in space. So I feel like the feelings that Julian was having, I was feeling with, playing the Outer Worlds for the first time. So with those kind of expectations now more grounded, I kind of went into Avowed as, oh, this won't be Obsidian's take on Skyrim, but rather their take on a fantasy, the Outer Worlds. And I think going into that, plus being removed from the fact that I haven't played a kind of fantasy RPG or any open world RPG kind of in the similar vein to this in quite some time, that I found myself I found myself enjoying it a lot more than I thought I would within the first 20 hours that I've played so far, because you guys know me, I'm not really a fan of the fantasy set piece genre time period in general. So, but I was pleasantly surprised at how much I'm actually enjoying this game. And kind of to start things off, you're gonna create a character, and boys, you guys also know me. As someone who is deathly disgusted and afraid of mushrooms, I almost
man.
quit playing the character creation portion. But Julian, tell me about your godlike.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I started the game first hiding the face fungus
Right.
because I was a
Mm.
coward. So I started the game hiding the face fungus. But then
Wait, which face fungus did you decide to go with?
I ended up going with the ones that look like coral on like the green coral
Mm.
on the face, and then the big like brown tree trunks coming out of the head. And
Oh, okay.
I kind of based my character around that. Well, I mean, before I get to that, like I started initially hiding it, and then I got a few hours in, and then realized that a lot of the characters do react to your face because it is part of the story. So I was like, all right, like let's not be a coward here. Like
Right.
let's play into this lore that they are building. Let's play into the story that they're building. So I re-rolled the character because you can't change your appearance in game, which is unfortunate. But what do you do?
Mm.
So I re-rolled the character, doing the character that I have now, and I kind of built my character around that base coral thing because it's green. So my character has like green highlights, and like it ended up actually looking pretty great that I'm actually quite happy with
Hmm.
having re-rolled. Um, but yeah, that took a while for me to like get used to, I guess, because it's like, I felt like at the start I was kind of being forced into it. But then after a while, I'm like, you know what, like this is fine. Like I don't think I really have a problem with this.
Hmm.
So, Julian, you're telling me you have a godlike that has green hair and tree branches sticking out of her head.
Yeah, and like face, like coral holes in her face.
Julian, I know you're a diehard sapling, but you have to move on, Julian. You have to move on. She reincarnated somewhere else.
Never.
Uh,
Oh
what
man.
was your backstory that you picked?
I went to so I initially started, my first character was the academic. So then I figured like, oh, like maybe I'll do the court augur or whatever. I'm
Yeah,
not loving the court augur. I kind of wish I stick to the academic because the court augur is all like weird and like spiritual, I guess. And I'm like, I'm
yeah.
not sure this is the character I wanted to play.
I chose the same background, and more often than not, I find the background specific choice or dialogue choices that you can give don't really align with my playstyle, where
Mm.
I was heavily debating re-rolling, but I was already so far deep in that I kind of stuck with it. And it's a shame that I'm not picking those dialogue choices just because they don't really align with how I want to play this character. But Matt,
Hmm.
how's your godlike looking?
I think my godlike basically looks exactly the same as Julian's.
Nice.
I wanted to
Guys,
get
she reincarnated. It's okay to move on.
I wanted to use that, like, the kind of like funguses that kind of look like a big purple butterfly landed on your face.
Oh, like
Okay.
the one that covers your eyes and stuff.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I wanted one eye at least. And since they didn't have like, just one eye being covered by like, just one of those things, I ended up just going with the kind of like the green coral kind of look with the branches sticking out of my head. In terms of background, I picked the court noble,
Oh, how
which
is that?
I actually really like the court noble responses, but I think it goes very much against how I'm playing my character because I have like a hard siding with Paradis instead of Adier.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And
You're a traitor to the Empire. Is what you're saying.
I'm a traitor to the Empire, but like I think the court noble has a lot of very good kind of like it it almost feels very like, oh, it is what it is kind of responses, and like that's how it's going to be. Like you have to be like tough to grow up in this world kind of responses, which I
Hmm.
I really like. I was considering the court augur before I picked that, but the way you guys are saying it, I'm kind of glad I didn't.
Yeah, I'm kind of bummed out that I like every response is like ooh to the gods or something.
Yeah.
And then I'm like
Hmm.
I get it, like I guess that's a big thing in this world and it's like maybe on some level like it makes sense. But I
Hmm.
don't think it makes sense for the character I have in my head.
Yeah.
Where I was see the reason I picked this background, Julian, I don't know about you, was that when I was actually reading through the kind of bios or the descriptions that each of the classes had, there was that little snippet of how they were kind of like a back alley fortune teller, or kind of just trying to make it in the streets before the emperor discovered them.
Hmm.
And I was hoping that their dialogue choices might be more, as you said, Matt, kind of empathetic to the Paradis
Mm.
population, just because they grew up on the streets in theory. But then yeah, it was the harsh truth of, oh no, they're just talking about the gods and the voices in the wind a lot, which again, not my play style or not the character I want to do. But what I did find interesting, and it's something that I potentially want to either do on reroll or on another playthrough, just because I don't think you can have multiple saves dedicated to other classes. But apparently, and I'm not sure if you guys have heard, if you pick like the war hero class or whatever,
Mm.
um, you some of their dialogue choices kind of indicate that you have a history with the Inquisitor, and you can also
Oh,
kind of
okay.
imply that you
Oh.
had relationships with her either before or after she turned into whatever she is right now. And when I found that out, it was that the notion of, I don't want to be, super emperor or empire military, but at the same time, if you're telling me there's some sort of romance, at least prior romance avenue to explore, I'm kind of down with that.
Mm.
Julian, what do you think about no romancing in this game?
What do you mean I can't romance sexy fishman Garrus from Mass Effect?
Okay, I was saving this for later, but as Mass Effect boys, we have to discuss it. Matt, what do you think about Garrus being in this game?
Yo, I'm into it. I really I really like Fish Garrus.
Yeah.
Uh, I think like of the companions that I've got so far, and I guess like C because they show you like the companions. Fish Garrus has been my favorite.
For the record, his name's Kai,
Hmm.
but Julian, what are your thoughts on Kai?
Uh, he's kind of a mainstay in my party because he's
Mhm.
like I'm playing my character as like a more of a mage-ish build. So like I need a tank. So
Right.
fish Fishman Garrus is always there. Um
Hmm.
Okay.
yeah, so I don't know. I think and it sucks to say because like I think he's so far with the and granted I don't have the full party yet, but with the party that I do have, I think he's kind of the only one that's really like staying with me in terms of like
Right.
character wise. Because he's and I don't know when it's gonna unlock for everyone, but he's the only one right now. I'm in like the third map, and I don't know how many maps there are. He's the only one right now that kind of has a very like very clear, um, I guess like to use a Mass Effect term, like a loyalty quest happening.
Right.
Um,
Hmm.
like his unlocks in the second map, and you're getting hints of the possible. loyalty quest for the second and the third character. But like they haven't unlocked yet for me. And so right now the only one that has any kind of like depth, outside of like vague posting, because a lot of the times like this, especially the second companion, I'm not sure if you guys have you should have the second companion by now,
Yeah,
I think.
Marius, right?
Yeah. Like a lot of his companion quests right now is like vague posting of like, I'm angry about this, but then when you ask him about it, he's like, I don't want to tell you, and it's like, okay,
Yeah.
like or
Classic
like
Marius, you guys.
yeah.
Uh,
And then it's like, so the only one that's actually like has approached me with like, here is a background quest, or here is something about me, is Fishman Garrus. And I don't know, it's weird that it's still the case in the third map of the game.
Right.
mhm.
So he's right now, unfortunately, the only one that's really kind of like doing anything for me.
Fair, fair.
Mhm.
Well, Julian, you mentioned it that you're playing a more wizardy character and Kai is kind of your tank.
Mhm.
So I got to ask, how are you guys liking just the general combat and what's your play style when you kind of step into these enemy encounters? Julian, you said you're a wizard. How are you finding that play style?
Oh my God. Okay, I have too much to say about this, so I'm gonna pass it off to Matt first because
All right, fair,
Okay.
fair, fair.
I feel like I've been talking a lot, and I feel like I'm just gonna go into like the longest rant about like
Okay,
Okay. 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 Um, I initially wanted to play a more wizardy character,
same.
but I had totally forgotten that this world has guns. And where I ended up landing is more of like a spellblade kind of character, where I am, as one of my weapons, I'm using a tome where I summon out a, what do you call it? Like the magic spear weapon. And in my other weapon, I'm using the, how do you say what is it? Like, acrobas? The rifle, basically.
Hmm.
oh yeah, yeah.
And I'm really enjoying this playstyle. So I ended up basically doing not stealth sniper because you can't stealth with a loud ass gun, but being able to shoot and attacking with like going into melee with the spear when I need to is a very fun playstyle for me, and it I think gets around what was initially one of the biggest problems in the combat, which was the kind of like level scaling on the enemies.
Right.
Because, like I sure like a lot of people have heard who like, or like experienced in Avowed, where if you were playing prior to the release date patch, the level scaling was like really, really bad. Where if an enemy was at all like, a upgrade tier over you, they took, I want to say it's like 30 or
Yeah,
40%, like
30%.
yeah,
That's
off
insane.
damage. But they've like changed it in the day one patch where, you know, now it kind of scales up. So if they're only like one tier ahead of you, it's like 10, and then like 20, and then 30, or maybe it's like more like different than that. But it 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 gradually increases now, instead of it just being, oh, they're stronger than you, okay, they have a hard like 30% increase. But I don't know, I think the in terms of just like how the fights actually feel, I really, really like the combat. um I really like, I know that it's kind of like divisive on if you kind of like this sort of thing, but I really like how magnetized your hits are to the enemy.
Hmm.
So you don't have to get, worry too much about aiming your melee attacks. And if you are having issues, with the kind of weapon scaling towards the start, I would suggest the Spellblade playstyle, because when you summon the weapons for the Spellblade, they ignore the debuff that you get for fighting somebody that's a different like quality class than you. So you don't have to deal with that at the start. But yeah, I think the one thing that I really, really want the most for the battle is just because like I'm having a hard time in the second area with this. I want an enemy highlight, because I mean, I guess like kind of setting spoilers for the second area. The second area is very
Very
um
drab. Like,
yeah, it's drab, but
yeah.
like the areas are also very like they're fungally in nature, right? Like
Mhm.
you know, you have a lot of mushrooms, you have a lot of kind of like tall grass everywhere,
Yeah.
and the enemies are all walking
Yeah, all like
mushrooms,
mushrooms. Yeah.
or they're like tree people, and
Yeah.
the amount of times that I just didn't realize an enemy is like immediately to my right is kind of wild. I really wish there was like some kind of like enemy highlighting for the more less
And
visually acute of us.
the mini map helps, I think, because they're pretty like highlighted in the
Mm-hmm.
mini map. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I know what you're talking about though.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The second area I don't think I was a huge fan of. The first area I really liked. The second area I'm not a fan of. The third area I'm
Yeah.
not, granted I'm not too deep into it, but
Mm-hmm.
the setting is really nice. But
Oh.
I'm just not a fan of swamps, I guess. Um,
Mm.
like I like Dark Souls games, and every single one of those has a swamp.
Oh. Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
but
Yeah,
but I don't know.
I like the secondary. I actually have been really liking the map, like area
Mm.
design in general. But before we like get too far into that, Jaren, how are you playing this game?
Man, to be honest, you guys, I'm actually really liking the combat where uh of course, Julian, we chose a similar background, so I feel like our characters are supposed to be more, their starting stats are more, skewed towards, intelligence and kind of things to support a magic build. But I'm really fighting the urge just to respect because one, I like having intelligence answers or those dialogue choices, but I personally really love the hand to hand combat where I think my two weapon sets are one set I have a pistol, and then I have the axe that does freeze damage when you hit someone. So I like to go
Mm-hmm.
in,
Mhm.
freeze them, and then jump out to shoot them a bit. And then I alternate that with the one of the unique shields you get early on because I love parrying, and I combine that with the dagger, the fire dagger that you get from one of the bounties as well, because I haven't found a unique one-handed sword yet. But
Mm.
I don't know, I really like how the hand-to-hand combat feel, or at least the melee combat feels, just because I feel like it just feels really impactful. I think I like the little slow-mo you get when you successfully parry someone, and I don't know when I because I've tried to use tomes before and some of the spells, and I just don't feel that they're as satisfying as the melee combat presents
Mhm.
itself as,
Yeah.
or even the guns, to be honest. Where one of the first tomes that I got, it let me do the icicle attack, the shock attack, and a fire attack, plus the shield bubble or whatever, and I just didn't find those spells really satisfying where I found myself I would only just shield bubble up and then switch to my axe, and then I just thought maybe I'll just rotate this out of my current weapon rotation. But that's kind of the playstyle I have. I do have a question for you guys. um
Mm.
Maybe it's because I haven't forced myself to learn it or add it to my muscle memory, but how are you guys using your companion abilities a lot during your encounters, or is it mostly just you going at it and letting them fend for themselves?
And for themselves, mostly for me. I
Ah,
mean,
okay.
Oh.
once you get the second character has is more of a or no, sorry, third character. The third character is like the healer type character, which is
Oh,
weird that
okay.
you do not get that until the third character. But anyways,
Yeah.
the third character is like gives you healer and also shields, has skills to give you shields and healing. So like that's kind of the only time I've been kind of consciously aware of like, okay, like what do I need right now? And then like pulling out that character. But usually like Kai, Fish Garrus, like kind of tanks on their own. And I don't even know what the second guy does. He was
Yeah.
just there for
Mm.
me.
I've been using the active or the companion abilities like on like my command pretty much.
Okay.
I actually really like their abilities. You know, like Kai has basically two taunts on him,
Mhm.
so you know, pulling people off me whenever I'm getting crowded is like when I'm going to manually use those. Marius has the bind, which is like very nice
Yeah.
for playing ranged. He has the Heartseeker shot that's just like just like a big like damage spike, and he is he gets like a slash that I really like for since I'm using the what do you call it the rifle which has a long reload. By the way, I don't know how you guys are doing your stats. All of my stats are going into dexterity just for reload reduction.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
But for how long it takes to reload, it is I'm just using his attacks. I feel like they have like a compared to Kai, I guess like a shortish cooldown.
Right.
Like it's very nice for oh he has like a quarter of his life left from like me doing 3/4 of his life with my rifle. I'm just gonna have Marius finish him off.
Mhm.
Yeah, just because doesn't one of Marius's abilities essentially have a higher chance to just instantly kill someone if they're stunned? Or did I just misread that?
No, yeah. That's one of the
Okay.
upgrades you get for I think the backstab.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I should respect considering how much melee combat I'm doing. And I don't know, guys. I keep pumping it into intelligence because just on the off chance I need to do a intelligent dialogue choice, I want to be the smart person in the room. But
Mhm.
that's just me.
I
Uh
actually really, really like how all the stats are used for conversation. Or
Yeah.
yeah.
I can think like most of the stats are used for conversation. I don't know if I've had like necessarily a dexterity one, but I like that like there isn't a charisma stat or something like that.
No, that's a really good point. And again, considering the background I chose and the dialogue choices that present themselves, I find that
Mm-hmm.
I'm really relying on a lot of the attribute dialogue choices. But Julian, uh, floor is yours, good sir. How do you feel about the combat and I guess the general gameplay
Oof.
now?
Um, I'm gonna preface this by saying that this entire opinion is colored by the fact that I was playing early access, where, as Matt mentioned earlier, was terribly unbalanced, I think, in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
when it came to the gear stuff. So my main problem with this game is that if you have played an RPG in the past, I don't know, decade or whatever, everything that you think would help you, if you do it here, it will actually unintentionally make you weaker in the long run. So what that kind of means is, so when I started playing, I wanted to be a mage, right? So I wanted to focus on magic. Um, I wanted to focus on magic. So I built my character towards, um, like all intelligence, upgrading my weapon so that it is, like all my grimoires are like at the top, and you can have several grimoires, so you can have several like magic spells and stuff. So I was trying to rotate out of those. But then I found that the magic for me isn't super fun. I think I just found like a lot of the magic is just different flavors of group attacks. So it's like here's a ice
Mm-hmm.
group attack, or here's a fire group attack, or here's a, whatever group attack. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna switch it out. And then I tried a different playstyle, which is sword and pistol, which I actually quite like. So I had the fire sword in one hand and pistol in the other. Um, but then the problem then is that a lot of this game, you would think when it comes to your level, is that, when you're thinking of an RPG, you think that, like you go into an area, you find enemies that are really hard to kill, and RPG, the first thing you would think about is that I'm gonna level up and I can come back. But
Mm-hmm.
the, that doesn't really matter so much in this game, wherein even if you're leveled up, as long as your gear isn't to the same level as these enemies, you are still at a significant disadvantage. And again, this is me talking in early access, wherein I guess in some level they kind of balanced it now. But the problem is that in order for you to properly upgrade a lot of your legendaries, you need to be breaking down unique weapons, which is again is kind of contrary to if you've once again played a lot of RPGs, right? Because you find a unique weapon, a lot of the times you want to hold on to it because it
Yep.
has probably a unique thing that you want to play around with later. And the thing too is that a lot of the game early on feels like it's encouraging you to be experimental. So like, like the fact that you only need to pay 200 gold to respect your attributes
Hmm.
and your stats, like that tells me or that signals to me that they want you to try to play around with things. Like, okay, like, hey, if this isn't working for you, play around with it. But then it's like, okay, sure, but then if I want to be at the level to be fighting these enemies in a fair way, I have to be upgrading these weapons. And in order to upgrade these weapons to a decent amount, I have to be breaking down these unique weapons. So like, how can I experiment if I have to break down these uniques, right?
Right.
So like, if I have these shields and they're unique shields, I can't play around with them later on if I have to break them down to feed what I have now,
Hmm.
if that makes sense. So it's like, in order for me to play this game in a way that's not frustrating, I have to lock in what playstyle I want to have pretty early on and kind of stick with it. So like, I don't know, I think that ended up really souring me on a lot of it. And I
Hmm.
think it's like a feeling that I haven't really, unfortunately, haven't really been able to get over or get past. Because like I get that they balanced it, but even that balance still isn't like super great, I think.
Yeah.
Like
No.
there
Yeah.
are, yeah, like I know they balanced it, but I honestly didn't feel, I didn't really feel the balance even when I went back into it after patch one. Like there were still enemies in the first area that I was only like, one or two below. Like they only had one or two
Hmm.
skulls over me, and it was still kind of a chore to fight them. Because like the fights, when an enemy is over you, it's not it's not that it becomes hard, it just becomes a chore where
Yeah.
they just become sponges. Because like you have a lot of mobility in this game, which means you can kind of kite a lot of the enemies. So like it then just becomes a matter of kiting enemies and kind of like picking them off. And some people would say like, well, that's your fault. You could just leave and then come back. But then,
Hmm.
but then like a lot of the times there's no way to really telegraph where you're supposed to go. So like New Vegas, because there's two philosophies when it comes to RPGs. There is make it so that the world map, you can go anywhere and you will be fine. So that's like the Bethesda method, right? In Bethesda games and Skyrim in Fallout, like it doesn't matter where you go, it doesn't matter what level, the enemies will scale with you. So you can explore to your heart's content. The Obsidian method, which they did with New Vegas, is, there is a very clear areas that you're not supposed to go in. And for a lot of people, some people will say like that is a preferred method because then there is a very, there is an experience that you can actually have that the game developers want you to have. So they can have areas where it's like, okay, very clearly you're not supposed to be in this area. But when you return to it later and you can overcome the area, there's a sense of triumph, right? It's like, okay, this area was something I'm not supposed to be in, but now I can come back. I'm now a badass. I'm like now this great, after all these hours of playthrough, I can finally conquer this area. There's a sense of triumph. But in New Vegas, there's a very clear telegraph of where you're supposed to go.
Right.
So like if you play New Vegas, you know what I'm talking about. You can get to New Vegas at the start of the game if you go north. But if you go north, you're going to fight Deathclaws. So like you could technically go to New Vegas within the first few hours of the game. But like very clearly it's telegraphing this isn't the way. And then the quest that you're getting is clearly pointing you south. So like the quest of like, okay, where you're supposed to go, a lot of it points you south. But I'm not getting that in Avowed. Um, like it's telling you like
Hmm.
you're getting these quests, but you're getting these quests all over the map. So it's like there isn't really a telegraph of like, yeah, sure, you're under leveled, but like you're not telling me where I can safely go except for going there, realizing these enemies are too high level and then like just leaving. So then you're kind of just wasting my time. So like I'm not getting that sense of like that same sense of like a curator kind of managing my experience. I'm just kind of getting like I don't know. I'm very like again, it's like I'm very this perspective once again is I recognize that on some level it's a little sour because of initial impressions. Um but I don't know, it's weird wherein there's a lot of things that are telling you to be open and explore, but there are so many things gameplay wise that are contrary to it. Um yeah, like if I want to switch out now and like try like me listening to Matt talk about using like the aquabus or whatever, the shotgun thing. I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
that sounds fun, but like I can't try that now without starting a
Yeah,
new game
yeah,
because I broke down all my unique aquabuses, you know? It's like I
Mhm.
if I want to do that, I can't. There's no way for me to.
Uh-huh.
Like I'll have to literally start the new game to be like, okay, let's try this out. So like I don't know, like it's again,
yeah,
very colored perspective, but like and maybe unfair, but that's kind of unfortunately where I'm sitting at.
yeah.
Mhm.
I'm kind of in a peculiar spot right now, just because again, I'm about to finish the first island or the first area, but I haven't been upgrading my unique weapons just because, again, it takes that green upgrade material. I forget the name right now. That you can kind of find in the wild. You can kind of buy
Hydra?
from vendors. Yeah,
Mhm.
when they have available. But as you guys have noted, you have to break down uniques to kind of get them. And
Yeah. And the
I
unfortunately like you won't if you have all uniques, if you're using like all uniques, you don't I don't feel like you get enough Hydra naturally to upgrade all of them. So you have to break things down.
Yeah,
Mhm.
which is what worries me at this point because it's what do I commit to, and will I have to kind of commit to these weapons till the end of the game? And that's what's worrying me right now. It's kind of like the lockpick situation where I feel like you
Oh
don't get enough
man.
lockpicks either. And I'm at that point of if I come across a blue locked chest, I don't open them. Or I'll do the same scumming method of okay, I'll save, open it. I guess I don't really need anything here. I'll reload. And I'm doing the same thing for the purple chest now because I haven't found a locked yellow chest, but I'm assuming those would cost a lot more picks than I actually have right now. So I feel like that's also limiting me. And I feel that once I'm ready to leave the first island, I have to kind of settle on, I guess I'm sticking with these four weapons or whatever,
Uh-huh.
moving on. Where I was going to ask you guys, do you guys use the quote unquote common weapons or are you also fully equipped in all uniques?
Up until I think the past like 2 hours of my gameplay, I was using basically just upgraded versions of the common weapons.
Okay.
Um, I just recently found a unique rifle that I've switched to, but all my other stuff is just standard items.
Oh,
Um,
okay. How was that, influencing your gameplay now? Were you also faced with the same kind of choice paralysis that I guess I'm facing right now? Or by using the more common or general items, is that a bit more open?
the common general items I think felt better, but I did kind of run into that issue that I think Julian ran into towards the start, where you know I did want to play the kind of like magic caster style, so I was putting a lot of stuff into like different books, and it wasn't until that I settled on like a single particular book that it became a lot better for me. So I wasn't running out of materials, just trying to get what do you call it, like keep up with the enemy quality. But kind of going back to your lockpicks, for a game that has so few lockpicks available to you at a time, and like needing more than one lockpick per chest, I absolutely hate that you cannot mark things on the map.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
not even a waypoint. which is wild to me. Like you can mark the quest waypoints, but you can't make your own, which really sucks.
Yeah.
Where I don't know. I feel like there are. I like this game, uh, but there
Hmm.
are so many quality of life things that I would hope to that either get patched in or implemented in some capacity. Because again, it there are little things that kind of take me out of it, and uh, one
Uh-huh.
being the not being able to mark stuff on the map really got to me. The
Hmm.
lockpick things really got to me, and it's just the upgrade economy seems to be really bad. Where I feel like I want to sing this game's praises a lot more, just because when it clicks, I feel like this game's pretty fun for me personally. But for every time it clicks, 2 seconds later something doesn't click, and I think, oh man, that's really a shame.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
I, but just the general exploration, I find that I'm having a really good time with. I really feel like even though the first area seems pretty small, uh, I think I'm enjoying the fact that this isn't the same scale as like a Skyrim, just because
Hmm.
I feel like every couple of feet you'll see something,
Hmm.
and I'm not trying to make this out to be like some really big spectacle. Oh, you might see a backpack you can unlock, or you might see a dead body arranged in a certain way. Where I feel like just walking from point to point, I try not to fast travel as much as I can, just because
Hmm.
chances are if the map hasn't revealed itself, I'm missing something there, or I might find something small, I might find an item, and I find that pretty cool. And I do like the little platforming or mobility puzzles, just
Yeah.
because I don't know what it is, but I like the mantle
Yeah.
animation.
The movement
I
feels good.
like,
The verticality of the game, I think, is like
yes,
really good.
Yeah, I agree.
one
Um,
thing that really impresses me about just the platforming is a lot of the times I find myself making jumps that you think you're not supposed to make, where
yeah.
I think that's such a good design where each jump makes you feel like you just barely made it. And I think that is really great. And there are, speaking to the verticality, Matt, there are instances where you're just presented with a leap of faith. And
Hmm.
when I went to the lighthouse the first time and I got to the very top, and then you look over the edge and Kai's like, "Well, might as well." And I don't know, like it's those little things that make this game so charming. Where to a point you said earlier, Julian, where it doesn't really feel that reactive or that alive. Well, I agree. I feel like there's just a charm to the world that
Hmm.
really gets me going, and I appreciate. But at the same time, it is those little quality of life things that seem to, maybe it's a me problem, but seem to be preventing me from enjoying it a lot more, aka the upgrading, where it's my choice paralysis is making me kind of second guess what I have to do. Plus it's the notion of, oh, I figured maybe I'll just go into town, I'll go to a merchant, and if they're selling a unique item, I'll just buy it for the sake of breaking it down. But
Hmm.
I feel, correct me if I'm wrong, but things like your gloves or your boots or even your rings and amulets, you can't break those things down,
No,
correct?
you can only sell them, which
Yeah,
it becomes
which
like a
is
thing that is also I don't know if it's by design, but like I feel like you don't get enough money for like if you're buying Adra from stores, like I don't
yeah,
think you really get
Hmm.
enough money to do that. So like some people say like you should be like if you even if you can't break down armor or gloves or hands, like you should maybe be considering selling them. Which again kind of feeds into that choice paralysis and losing items that,
yeah.
Yeah.
might be fun to use later on.
You know, I one thing that I really actually don't like about the items in this game is that I don't know if you guys feel this way as well, but the uniques don't feel unique enough to me.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
They feel like like green or blue items in another game, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming
And
from.
also the unfortunate fact too is like because of what I'm talking about, that whole like kind of feeding into like having to use them as ingredients pretty much, it kind of even
Hmm.
further minimizes them. Because once I've kind of set into the groove of like, okay, these are the four weapons I'm just gonna upgrade for the rest of the game because like this is the only material I can like support or afford.
Hmm.
Every single unique item now has just become this is just gonna be something I break down
Right.
into to feed something else. So like even more so like just feeding into like what you're talking about like this it kind of just feels like it's called unique quote unquote, but it
Hmm.
really does kind of just feel like trash items in some cases.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I don't know what it is. Maybe I know I have to settle when I think my next play session just because I have to move on. I have nothing else to do in the first area. But it is at the same time of I don't want to limit myself just because I know this isn't a Bethesda RPG. I know that kind of quote unquote freedom isn't there, but at the same time I want it to be there, and I think that's what the biggest bummer is just
Yeah.
because I'm enjoying it a lot, but
Hmm.
I feel like the upgrade economy isn't there, and that's a particular design choice that is really getting to me. And maybe like I wanted to ask you guys, since you guys have been to more areas, if the economy opens up in some way, but from the sounds of it, it doesn't. And that's like the biggest shame, just because I feel like once I leave the first area, I'm locked into my playstyle at that point. And as someone who doesn't like the fact that I picked a certain background that doesn't jive with me, maybe I won't jive with my pistol and dagger and shield and axe. Or maybe I'll find a cooler one-handed sword in the next area that I can't do anything with anymore. Where I think
Hmm.
that's the biggest shame right now. But
Hmm.
I think general combat aside, Obsidian and their previous game is known for the character work, the story. I know we've been talking about the gameplay, but just not necessarily real quick, but in terms of the overall story, Matt, how are you feeling about kind of the narrative that's taking place in Avowed?
I feel like for me, the narrative right now is kind of middling for me.
Hmm.
Um, I feel like it is ramping up though to be something a bit more interesting for me because I, you have that kind of like voice in your head that's talking to you the whole time, and I'm getting to a point where it is now making more and more sense, and I'm getting a bit more information about the Dream Scourge where I yeah, like right now, or everything like up to now has been, nothing spectacular, but I feel like it is leading to somewhere very interesting for me.
Okay. Julian, before I asked you about your thoughts on kind of the overall narrative, just because you are further than us, what was your reaction when the story became New Vegas for a hot second?
What? Oh, when you get shot. I
Yeah,
was like, what? When? Oh yeah, no, totally. That actually caught me off guard for sure.
but what solving your murder aside, how are you feeling about the overall narrative now that you're in the third area?
Um, Overall, it's interesting. I am echoing some of what Matt was saying. But I think the Pillars of Eternity world I think is interesting. With the way I don't know if it's spoilers, because like there are a lot of things in this games that um because for some people they're selling Avowed as like a game you can kind of just jump into.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, in some sense you can. But the story that you're dealing with in Avowed is kind of a direct consequences of things that happened in Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2. So it's like, yeah, you could kind of jump into it 100%, but you're kind of like missing some context if you either didn't play that game or just didn't watch like a maybe like a lore video
Hmm.
before playing this game. So if you haven't, like I would have actually suggest like, hey, like maybe watch a lore video of of Eternity
Okay,
1
I
and
guess I
2.
know what I'm doing tonight.
Yeah, because like there are things, especially like with the nature of the gods and like
Hmm.
they kind of hint at it of like where all the godlikes, like what happened? Because everyone's like surprised, like, oh, there's a godlike, and like they've been disappearing for the past like like couple years and stuff, and a lot of these is like consequences of those games. Um, so like overall, it's kind of like I am liking the story as having kind of played Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2 because it's weird that they say this is. I mean, I'm sure you kind of have to in terms of trying to sell it to people, and since it's a new gameplay style, a lot of people they're kind of selling it as its own separate thing. But this is by and large Pillars of Eternity 3 essentially because you are kind of like dealing with, and you're not playing as the characters you are in Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2. You play as a watcher in those ones, but in Avowed, it's like you are kind of dealing with direct consequences of those games. So there is still kind of a connection there. But as of the mystery, it's it's unfortunate because it's coming off of last year's Baldur's Gate 3 because Baldur's Gate 3 number one, great story, but also number two is it also kind of has that mysterious voice in your head story happening, which I feel like will influence if you played Baldur's Gate 3, the voice in your head is immediately like suspicious, and someone you probably wouldn't trust.
Mm-hmm.
And in this game, I feel like for me, it's that's kind of like coloring it a little. Because I'm like, maybe this person can be trustworthy as I play it like as I play more of this game. But when that
Mm-hmm.
voice started talking in my head, immediately I was like, no, like I ain't trusting this. Like, who the fuck are you? You know?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So like, yeah, I mean, it's fine where it is right now. I'm curious where it's gonna go, but yeah, it's. I feel like a lot of my appreciation for it is coming from like an overall appreciation of like this world as opposed to this
Okay.
singular story.
Mm.
Yeah, as someone who doesn't have any affinity or even knowledge of Pillars of Eternity, I'm enjoying it for the most part, but I think it's all the side quests that I'm enjoying a lot
Yes. Yeah.
more just because
Mhm.
they're so self-contained. You can kind of figure out everything that's happening. And one in particular, I know we're kind of running long, but I feel like Matt, it was the one quest you told me to do, which was the Dawn Shredder
Mm-hmm.
storyline. And I feel like if I were to drop this game right after this podcast, like, Monster Hunters this week, don't need to touch Avowed. I feel like uh the Dawn Shredder quest is probably worth the price of admission for me as someone who's playing on Game Pass, just because I feel like it had everything that I find interesting about kind of Avowed in general. This is the first time for me personally that you meet a godlike. This is the first, other than yourself, of course.
Mhm.
This is the first time you're really dealing with seeing the effects of the soul magic that they talk about, but you don't really see firsthand in Paradise. So I think just the overall narrative of that quest was so interesting to me, and it had a pretty good conclusion that if I were to not pick this game up again, I think I
Mm-hmm.
would feel satisfied just experiencing that alongside Kai and um, Mirius or whatever. But Matt, as someone who
Mm-hmm.
put me on to this quest, what did you think of it?
I mean, I really liked it. Like, I actually think I like a lot of the kind of big side quests that I've done so far. Like, with Dawn Treader, I really enjoyed that. In the second act, I really liked the Rangers story. I It wasn't as big, but I liked that. There's a little like side story with a hermit that I really wasn't sure which way I should land on that one, and kind of going into what do you call it? Just like the quests in general. I like their alternate or their non-main quests a lot.
Mhm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
I like that. Hey, the bounties exist before you take the mission. I really like the painter quest or like the map quests where it's just like a screenshot of or like a painting or a drawing of an area with like an X on it, and you have to go
Yep.
find where that is. Like I really like that system. No, I like all the kind of like small storytelling bits of you're starting a quest, you're picking up all these like little what do you call it? notes or whatever, I mean, I guess like Obsidian has always done this sort of thing anyways, but I don't know, I really like it here. Of, oh, you hear a scream, you turn around, there's like some dude on the floor, and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go practice like pyromancy," and it's like, "Oh,
Uh,
well, I understand what happened here." Hmm.
I don't know. I like this game.
Hmm.
Again, I like the traversal, I like the combat, but there's just the little things that are slowly getting to me for the worse, and which is a shame just because I want to explore more of this world. I want
yeah.
to see more of this world, and I plan to do so, but it's just I have to commit now to this weapon set because again, if the economy doesn't get any better, then I don't know. For games such as this that should be, open to exploration, that I'm used to from even the Outer Worlds, just to be locked into a weapon set really pains me. Just because another thing I need to mention real quick, um, not a lot of jank abusing here, for my liking. Where guys, you know what's anti-fun? Having enemies throw rocks at you that seem to be heat-seeking missiles,
Oh.
and nothing more crushing than to kind of try to cut yourself away to regroup and have a rock slam into your head and kill you.
I know Rakush was like, uh, you know, kind of like ragging on me for this last week, but I think playing without music is very helpful for that because one, like until recently, the companions really did call out way too much,
Yeah.
and they
Oh
would say, "Hey,
yeah,
someone's about
your
to attack
armor.
you." Uh huh. Yeah, like for the armor, yeah, but as well, but like for the ranged attacks, since I am also playing range attacks are just gonna come out of nowhere. The companions are gonna say, "Hey, you're gonna get attacked," and there is a very slight ranged, like incoming ranged attack sound that I think is a lot easier to hear if you're not listening to it over music.
Mm.
Okay. Yeah. Avowed out now. I think we're all playing it on Game Pass, but you guys are playing on PC, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How's your performance going? Because I'm playing on the Xbox Series X, and for the most part, I think I'm playing on performance mode, and it's pretty good. But I have to admit, it's pretty jarring playing it for these hour-long sessions, and then going to my PC to play surprise some Zenless Zone Zero, and that running at like a buttery like high frame rate. So
Mm-hmm.
that became especially jarring to me. But not you're playing on PC. How's the performance for you?
I mean, it's very good for me. Like it, I recently did do a graphics card change, in prep for
Ooh,
Monster Hunter Wilds. So I like this game was like running like pretty nicely for me. I'm getting all of Fish Garrus's scales reflecting. It's pretty good.
okay, okay. How about you, Julian?
No, it's been running real smooth. I think it's just there are the texture pop-ins so every now and then, but I'm pretty sure that's an engine thing and not. I mean, it could be my PC, but I mean they're very infrequent. But I do spot them sometimes where Fish Garrus will the camera will quickly pan to him without scales, and then they will load in.
Oh man. Okay,
Uh,
I don't know if you guys get this. Do you guys just get like scared by your companion sometime? Because
Oh yeah, because like sometimes they like go into you, right?
no, not even
Okay.
that. It's that I don't know if you guys remember this video that we watched like a really long time ago about like Sherlock Holmes and like
Ah,
Watson.
Watson, just
Yeah,
appearing behind you.
yeah. The companions just appear because like when they can't find you normally, they'll just show up, and sometimes they'll show up in front of me, like around the corner, and it just scares me.
Sometimes sometimes they appear, and maybe like it's because like they appeared and then like took a few steps. Sometimes
Oh
they would like I would like end up inside of them,
yep, yep.
and
man.
like the view of my character would like like it would be like blocked for a while, and then until I take a step, and I'm like stepping out of that character.
Oh man.
I do admit one thing that I'm glad is still here is that classic companion jank of, oh, I'm crouched in a bunch of bushes or high grass and I'm hidden, and my companions are out in the open and no one's noticing them, and that makes me feel real
Hmm.
good
I
still.
love it. I love it.
But yeah, that has been Avowed. I know we talked about it for quite some time. Uh, I think our reception to it has been generally the same of we like this game, but and it's the but that takes it from a potentially great game, at least for me personally, to I like the world, but there's just some little things that are getting to me. But I do have a question, Julian. As someone who likes to mod things,
Mm.
how's the modding looking for Avowed? And in theory, could modding the economy make this a more enjoyable experience?
So right now, and I'm not sure, this could be an engine thing because as much as people like to rag on Bethesda using the creation engine, they use the creation engine for a specific reason, and that's because it is very modular when it comes to mods, where you can create, you can literally create like new characters, new quests, new stuff for it. But for Avowed, the mods right now, a lot of them are like any balance patches. So like basically you just download like a settings.ini file and like plop it into the like the Avowed thing, and then it'll kind of change something within games. So a lot of the mods
Right.
right now are just um basically like balance things. So like some of the mods are just basically things like, hey, the shopkeepers will now have more lockpicks for you to buy. Or they will the shopkeepers will now restock their stores a lot faster. Or
Okay.
hey, every level you'll get 2 ability points instead of one. And I think there's a lot of those balance patches, and I think it's entirely possible that they might be the way to kind of like balance the way how you would want to play. Because I have been experimenting with it. I have I have downloaded and installed the patch that gives you 2 ability points per level instead of one. Because I think for me, one of the things that I was kind of blown away by is that the game has a level cap of 30, which means
Oh,
that at the end
really?
of the day, you're gonna have 30 ability points at the end of it. But there are so many abilities, especially ones that seem useful, but like you don't want to spend an ability point on because you feel like it won't help you gameplay wise, like right away. So for example, the one I'm thinking in my head is like there's a ability perk that allows you to, when you pick up a plant, it gives you a percentage of getting double of what you picked up. um, which I
Hmm.
wasn't aware was pretty much a fundamentally useful perk because of just how the upgrade system works. But I was very hesitant to put a perk point in it because, you only get 30, and
Yeah.
there's other things that I would like to put perk points into. So that in my head kind of offloaded that worry, where now I get two per level. So I'm like, okay, now I'm going to be able to um just pick these passive tangential perks that like wouldn't pick up. And they're pretty much kind of just like making the gameplay experience, in my opinion, a bit more fun. And some
Okay.
people might argue like, oh, you're just cheating or whatever, but then at the same time, it's like the point of modding is you're kind of tailoring it to the experience that you want. And right now, like that experience isn't something that I feel personally is something that is balanced in my opinion. So like mods are kind of allowing that. So like you guys talk about the lockpicks and the missing lockpicks, and I feel like that's less of a difficulty and more of just that's less about how difficult the game is and more of just a kind of an annoyance in my opinion.
Hmm.
Because it's like like the only thing preventing you from opening this is the fact that lockpicks are so scarce, and lockpicks aren't a finite resource. So you can kind of wait for shopkeepers to restock them, but you just have to wait. So it's kind of
Yeah.
just like cutting out that waiting time, cutting out that like that having to kind of go through that annoyance, I guess, in my opinion. But that's
Hmm.
different philosophies. Some people might disagree with me, and that's fair.
Yeah.
Hmm.
No, yeah, that was something I was thinking about if I should move on to the PC just to help mod it, just because. again, there are some little things that if I could adjust, I feel like I would enjoy this game a lot more.
Hmm.
Um, or at the same time, it is. Can you just wait it out? Can I just wait it out for at a shop for maybe half an hour, just fast forwarding time to buy a bunch of lockpicks? Oh, but then there's the money issue. But I guess we'll see.
Hmm.
But yeah, so that's Avowed. Uh, Matt, is this a good appetizer for the Monster Hunter main course this week?
Ooh, I don't know. I don't know. I think it's hitting for me. And to be honest, I think I might be playing this like with Monster Hunter because
Okay.
I have been enjoying my time with it, and I think I have hit that point where I am going to be putting in some mods for it, like basically just the quality of life ones for now.
Yeah.
But like after that, like I don't know.
Yeah, maybe I'll since this is on Game Pass, maybe I'll go onto the PC and retrieve my save, and maybe we'll see. But
Hmm.
another beefy boy episode, boys. But real quick, we can't end off the episode without a "Don't Match Me" challenge. I'm bringing it this week, and if you're just joining us for the first time, I apologize for being sick and sounding under the weather, but at the end of every episode, we do a round of Don't Match Me, where we'll bring to you 5 questions, and all you have to do is come up with an answer that doesn't match my own. And if you want to play on a higher difficulty, you can potentially try not to match Matt and Julian answers as well. Sometimes these topics might really rack your brain. So since this is a audio journal, feel free to pause it whenever you're faced with a question you might not know. Look it up and hope that answer doesn't match ours. But
Hmm.
since we talked about Avowed for most of this episode, a big chunk of this episode actually, uh, my Don't Match Me challenge this week is let's just say RPG general because boys, we went on an adventure with Avowed. So to start off our adventure here on the Mistake Zone, let's pick a basic class or role that you typically see in RPG. So for the first question, name any basic class or role you normally can choose in an RPG.
Are we
So
talking WRPG or JRPG?
we're just talking RPG. Julian, that's up to you because this is the first question after all.
Okay.
So name any class or role you might find in an RPG in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If you said necromancer, you're out.
Mm.
Uh, Matt, which did
Hmm.
you land on?
I mean, I think I went with the classic. I went with a rogue.
Ooh, good class, good class.
Hmm.
Julian?
Repping the underappreciated 10-2, I chose Dancer.
Oh,
Ooh.
good class, good class. And good game. Some would say, aka me, best Final Fantasy game there is, but that's neither here or there. So we picked a class, and now we need to arm ourselves, boys. So name any melee weapon you generally find in an RPG. So name any melee weapon that you can equip in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If you went with a great axe, you're out.
Ooh.
Matt, what are you
Hmm.
equipping?
Jaren, you know me. I gotta go with my love of the spear.
Ooh,
Hmm.
okay, okay.
Hmm.
Julian, what do you have equipped?
Oh, just went with a classic sword.
Oh,
Ooh.
nice, nice. We're all melee boys here.
Hmm.
So, since we're all melee boys, we have to put maybe that might scale what attributes we're going to do. So, for question number 3, name we have attribute points, but name any attribute that you can slot points into that you generally find in an RPG. So, name any character attribute in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I went with dexterity.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Not where you slotting your attribute point in
Yo,
to.
I'm standing strong because I put my points into Constitution.
Oh, how about you, Julian?
Nice. Oh, I went with intelligence.
Okay,
Ooh.
Mr. Smarty Pants here. Julian, you're doing pretty well with your smart so far, but we have our class, we have our melee weapon, we have our attribute. But guys, we went to the armory and we're browsing their wares because we want to buy something for one of our equipment slots. So name any equipment slot. So just name any place you typically can put a piece of equipment on or a
Whoa.
type of equipment on. So name any equipment slot in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I went with the helm.
Oh man.
Ah, dang. Okay, you got
Oh
me.
man. Oh
What?
no.
Wait, that what did you pick?
Me? Oh,
Yep.
Jaren, I'm very close to you because I
Oh,
picked the
okay.
neck for
Ooh,
amulets.
okay. All right. Julian, did you unfortunately did you try to hide the helm or
Yep, I chose the helmet, unfortunately.
oh no,
Yeah.
Julian, you failed the intelligence check. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
failed it.
Don't
Yeah,
worry.
failed the check.
You can reload the save and try again. Maybe it will be different. But to kind of play off of something Julian mentioned during the first question, guys, we have our
Mm.
character built out, but this might be cheating because Matt, I believe this was one of your questions a
Ooh.
few weeks or months ago. But name an RPG type. What type of RPG are we in right now? In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Boys, I think we're in a tabletop RPG. Matt,
Ooh. Hmm.
what RPG are we in?
I went with an ARPG.
Ooh,
So like
okay.
I was thinking a Diablo like in terms of ARPG.
Okay. Julian, uh, since you reloaded your save, which RPG are we in?
CRPG.
Okay.
Hey.
Surprised none of us went with JRPG, but I'm gonna assume that would have been Rakush's response
Hmm.
if he
Hmm.
were here. And that was this week's Don't Match Me challenge. Once again, I want to thank uh, one of my best friends in the Horde world, Matt Alba, for joining us on another Beefy Boy episode. And of course, editing this podcast because let's face it, Matt, this might be a doozy based on the audio file that I send you
Oh man.
afterwards.
Yo, Jaren. Thanks as always for hosting this episode and bringing us our Don't Match Me for this week.
No problem, friend. I also want to thank our pal Julian for being able to join us once again to tell us about his time with Avowed. And let's be honest, keeping it real. Julian, you're a real one right now.
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm glad to be here.
I also want to shout out our The Real Mistake Zone League on Fantasy Critic. Some movement
Oh.
this week. Just want to kind of update everyone. Current standings. Julian, you are in first place with actual points right now because you scored on Civ 7 and lost records. Matt, you are
Hmm.
in second place right now uh, because you scored with Avowed, but on your heels, Rakush is currently in third place because he scored with Like a Dragon, Pirate Yakuza, and Hawaii. But of
Ooh.
course, we all know this week Monster Hunter Wild, so that will drastically change. Uh, but in terms of movement, Julian, I think you had the most movement because you have dropped Judas from your game roster, and you successfully bidded on adding Borderlands 4 and Mafia: The Old Country.
Ooh.
Uh,
Yeah, I got bumped
likewise,
from projected fourth to projected third from those moves.
and for me personally, I also won two bids and added Tony Hawk's 3, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 remastered, currently unannounced, and unannounced mainline 3D Mario platformer because I
Ooh.
just thought I'd throw a bid anyway. Um, so that's the current The Real Mistake Zone League over at Fantasy Critic. Matt,
Hmm.
Pokemon Days coming up, direct. Do you think there might be an announcement you might bid on, or are you saving your coins for the Nintendo Direct happening in April?
Ooh. I'm waiting for that Nintendo Direct in April because I don't I want something new in the Pokemon thing, Pokemon Direct that's gonna be on a Thursday, but I feel like since they haven't put out a lot of information about Pokemon ZA,
Yeah,
or is that the I feel like it's gonna be focused on that.
fair. And probably updates to TCG Pocket,
Mhm.
Go, and maybe they usually don't do anything about the TCG physical, but I'd be surprised if they did. Maybe an anime short to be shown off as well.
Mm.
I think rumor has it an Xbox indie kind of something adjacent to that will be this month as well. So also something to kind of keep an eye out for bidding. But anyways, boys, thank you again for joining me on this week's episode. Another Beefy Boy episode once again. And Matt, please take it away.
This has been the Mistake Zone, and we're all out of upgrade mats.
So true, Matt.
Yeah.
So true.